Hello, everyone. I'm Billy DiMichele, Senior Vice President of Creative Development at Scholastic, and I'll be your moderator for Teachers Talk, Scholastic Listens, a conversation with Scholastic Chairman and CEO Dick Robinson and 8 elementary school teachers. A huge welcome to all the educators who've joined us for today's conversation on this kickoff day to Teacher Appreciation Week. There are truly no words that can describe the year that was. Over the last few months, so many of you have reached out to us and shared your struggles and your worries as you've navigated the complicated and sensitive circumstances in your classrooms and homes. So today, we're listening and hoping you'll share what you've learned this year. And together, we'll address some of the issues impacting you, your students, and your classrooms. We're joined by 4 teacher panelists, and we'll also be hearing from 4 other educators throughout the program. But first, let's meet our panelists. She's a 33-year veteran from Covina, California. Welcome first grade teacher, Kathy Sahagian. A 19-year veteran from the Bronx, New York. Welcome 5th grade teacher, Wandiza Williams. He's dedicated the last 16 years to elementary education. Let's welcome Leo Tabita. And from San Diego, California, we're joined by another first grade teacher, a 15-year veteran. Please welcome Crissia Cabral. Welcome to all of you. We look forward to a robust conversation. And now, it's my great pleasure to introduce the host of today's roundtable discussion, the Chairman and CEO of Scholastic, Dick Robinson. Welcome, Dick.
Thank you, Billy, and thanks to the teachers who are here. You know, this has been an amazing year. We've learned so much about each other. We've learned so much about our kids, the parents. It's been a watershed year in many ways, and I think we've learned things that we're going to keep for the rest of our teaching careers as knowledge that we've gained at this particular time. For Scholastic, you know, we're all about our helping teachers. We are present in many classrooms with our book clubs and magazines and classroom libraries and instructional materials and digital information and a whole bunch of stuff. But it's all designed to be a help to the teacher in carrying out what he or she wants to do. Thinking of ideas that are going to make it easier for you to get across the points that you're trying to cover with your kids, provide stories and things that will make it easier for you to get into their lives and connect with their emotions. So we're really just about our as being a person with you in the classroom, helping you do what you are there to do, which is to engage your kids, give them the skills, most of all, connect them to learning and to you and to their own well-being and development as children and young people. And I know from talking with you that we're going to have a wonderful discussion today about exactly how that all works and how we can be partners with you and how you can use what we do and how we can work together to carry out the goals that you have.
Thank you, Dick. Based on what we've been hearing from you in the short time that we have together, we're going to try to focus our conversation around the following 4 themes: the student-teacher-parent connection, digital learning, partnership, and representation, access, and equity. And Dick, I'm going to hand this over to you for the very first question.
Well, first of all, in this tumultuous year, how are you all feeling? Let's start with Leo.
Wow, first and foremost, thank you so much for asking. It's comforting to know that someone is genuinely interested in hearing about and sharing in your experience. I feel that so often as educators, we're so wrapped up in the social, emotional, and academic needs of our students that we neglect our own welfare. So thank you so much for asking. And to answer your question, I'd say I'm feeling a plethora of emotions. First, proud that we've made it through this, I'll agree with you with the word tumultuous, school year, overcoming this huge obstacle. I'm cautiously optimistic about what the upcoming school year is going to bring. And I would also say that, to be quite honest, I'm exhausted because it's been extremely challenging to balance different learning styles of students from across different platforms and teach myself this new technology.
Well, if you're exhausted, you don't sound it, Leo. You sound inspired and engaged and involved, and I know our other teachers are probably feeling some combination of both, but I bet most of our listeners will identify with the word exhausted, because this has been a tremendous drain on teachers this year, and for their emotions of their kids, the families, the confusion in the schools, and all the challenges that faced all of us during this year. So, Chrysia, what are you feeling?
I'm probably going to echo lots of what Leo said. First, thank you for asking the question. You know, we don't hear that question a lot as teachers, and when we do, it's kind of oh, we're fine. We do that a lot just to get through. But, you know, there is a lot of exhaustion and a lot of overwhelming emotions that have brought this year. And I feel like with all those things, I feel grateful that I've had this opportunity to work through such a challenging year, and I've learned and I've grown and have really overcome a lot of challenges that I didn't think I'd be able to. So in the end, I'm grateful. And in the end, I feel more positive about what next year is going to bring. So I'm grateful and thankful. I'm feeling better than I was when I started this year.
Wonderful. What's the top of mind on what you've learned?
I've learned to not sweat the small stuff and really focus on the love of children. I've learned that in the end, they're all going to be okay, because that's our job as teachers, is to help them be okay, not about the 10,000 things they need to learn. What they really need is love. And that's what I feel like I've walked away with.
I think a lot of people feel that way. You've just said it so beautifully. I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, I think so too.
Looking at kids in a different way. And we know how important the connection is between us and them, and how much we're doing for them by acknowledging that connection and who they are. So, Kathy, what are your thoughts at this moment, and what are you feeling?
Well, I agree. It's nice to be asked, because we don't think of ourselves as teachers. We're always thinking of others. I also agree with what Leah and Chrysia said. Exhausted, but right now I'm kind of starting to feel a little bit hopeful, because it looks like things are starting to turn around. It looks like, maybe in the fall we might have all of our students back to class. So I'm excited about the potential of what could be in the future. And, just less is more. Don't try to do everything. You're one person, whatever you give to the students, they will be grateful. And even on those really hard days, I always feel that the kids make me feel better, and they give me hope, and they are just so happy to see your face and happy to be reading books and loving things. And I think that has been what's really sustained me and kept me going.
It's wonderful, because you're getting back from them, and that's driving you forward to connect with them even more. And I think this year we've all needed each other more, and the kids are probably so glad to have you there, kind of organizing things for them and providing them the information they need and connecting with them as people. And that's something we've all have learned this year, is how much we need each other, I think. Wandiza, how are you feeling?
I have to thank you, Dick, for asking. It's one of those questions where you just go to your go-to response. It's like, I'm okay, I'm doing well. But when you actually take time out to really think and sit in your emotions, you can discover that you really feel a variety of things. And I think most teachers, this year, the level of exhaustion, I know we've been using that word, but I don't think many people understand the plight of teachers and what they go through on a day-to-day basis, and just how challenging it is when we were in person, and even more so with remote and trying to learn new technology and reach kids in a different way that we never have, all while being in a pandemic, right? So there's just been a lot going on. But I am also optimistic just based on what I've seen the kids do and their resiliency to come in every day with a smile on their face and to keep going. And just to see the support of our colleagues and everybody showing up every day, even though we all have personal stories, right, of things that have impacted us and affected us throughout this year. But we show up every day and we're hopeful that things are about to make a turn for the better.
Yeah, it's wonderful how the optimism is shining through. And also, I think another common element that I hear from all of you is the kids themselves. We're not trying to cover material, we're trying to reach children because we're in such a difficult time or such an unusual time, a different time for all of us. We're all reaching out to try to learn things about how to function in this current world. And what I hear that the teachers saying is we have to get into the heart of the kids and let them know how important they are and find things that are going to connect to them and make them more excited about learning. And in the meantime, providing the safe framework for them to have that excitement, to have that joy, to have that love of learning and the experience of working together as a class and with you under the direction of these wonderful teachers. So it's sort of a different year from that point of view. We're not covering material, we're reaching kids.
You know, Dick, I think I'm going to lead into the next question. It's a very different year, a year where students, teachers, parents, everyone's had to adjust to something very different, whether it was remote learning, hybrid learning, in-school learning, the mixture of all three. And I think there's been a lot of discussion out there about kids' social emotional well-being and how they're responding to instruction, right? And I know that deficit language like learning loss can be terribly unconstructive, but what have been some of the biggest challenges reaching every child in the way that you're used to? And how do you measure their learning under the circumstances you've been working in? I'm going to start with Chrissy. I'm going to throw that right to you.
The biggest challenge this year has been time. Father time is just sucking it up. You know, we, especially virtually, when we were virtual, you can't get to every kid every day. And that's really hard. So you talked about, learning loss. Well, learning loss is only something if you make it something, right? Like we are all about gains. And for each kid, their measure of success is a different level. But to personalize that experience for kids, you really need those one-on-one conversations. Dick was talking about all of the things that we were doing in order to reach that social emotional. A lot of my time spent with kids is just listening to them. They just want someone to listen to. So I feel like my biggest struggle or challenge has been creating this time where I have enough time to meet every single one of them and just hear them, because that then creates these amazing opportunities for, I know what kind of books you like. I know what kind of lessons you need. Just being a good listener. Time.
Time. How about you, Leo?
I think that the classroom dynamics have certainly changed this year. You really have to sit down and recalibrate your teaching style to accommodate the students' learning needs. But first and foremost, take into account their social emotional well-being. You can't just jump into a lesson and assume that the priority is going to be whatever math or reading lesson there is for that day. You have to think about what they're experiencing, how they're feeling, and to see how something like that is going to ultimately impact their learning for that day. Ultimately, you're trying to reimagine these human connections for children who are no longer in front of you in the flesh. So I think that's certainly been a challenge, but not one that we've been able to stop us from fulfilling what we set out to do.
I don't think anything gets in that way. For some reason, I have that belief. Wandiz, I wanted to ask you, clearly you've had to make some changes in the way you teach this year. Do you think any of those changes are for the better or maybe even permanent?
Yes, this remote experience has taught me that building relationships is at the core of our work. Like whether you're in person or you're remote, you have to find a way to connect with your students. And being remote, trying to build a classroom community where everyone is on in their own little screen has been difficult. But I'm grateful that I've been able to establish a community with my students where they want to come. They actually come in and they want to turn their cameras on and they're present and vibrant and ready to go. So it shows that your heart condition speaks to kids. When they know that you care about them, you're there for them, you want what's best for them, they feel it and they see it, even through a screen. I have kids that are waiting at the end of every class for virtual hugs. Like they literally stay there and they're like, virtual hugs. I'm like, oh, I forgot it was a virtual hug every day. Okay, so we're gonna do that. So it just shows that when they see your heart as a teacher and they know that you're there for them, that community can be built through a screen or anywhere. And that's what this has taught me, because I really felt that I was going to lose those connections with students that you build in person. Of course, it's not exactly the same, but they still feel it and they know that you're there for them.
Kathy, how about you? What are you taking with you from this year?
Well, the biggest thing for me has been technology. I always thought I was pretty savvy, but after all of this experience with trying different venues, different, Flipgrid and Pear Deck and Seesaw and Google Classroom and all these things, I think it's going to be a really positive thing. And I think in the future, when I'm teaching, I will give students more opportunities to make a little video and explain their learning instead of writing it on a piece of paper. I'm going to challenge them to do some other things with technology. While that has been a positive, I have to say some of the negative has been difficult for the parents to log in. They weren't used to using technology. So not only was I helping my students get onto technology, but I also had to have like little seminars or little times when I could be online to help support those parents. Because during this pandemic, what I've learned more than anything is how challenging it is for families, for parents. Everyone wants the best for their child and they want to do whatever they can, but not knowing everything about technology has been a challenge, and so being able to support the parents and the students has been a challenge, but the positive has been that I will take that with me, and in the summer when I have time to reflect, I'll be able to go back and decide what things do I want to use again next year. And so out of something so challenging and hard, I think a lot of things have been learned.
I love that attitude, but I'm going to stay with you for a second, Kathy, if it's okay, because you brought up the parents. And I'm wondering, has the at-home learning put a strain, or has it improved maybe your relationship with parents and family members? I mean, how do you continue to build these positive connections between home and school that are so crucial?
That's so great that you asked that, because one thing that I have really thought a lot about is how I talk to my parents more now than ever. They're reaching out, whether it's on a text app with Remind, or they're saying, can I stay online after you're done with the students and ask you some questions? I feel because it's virtual, I've had more contact because, for example, parent conference or other times when we would meet, they'd have to go to the school. And sometimes parents could not get off of work or they might be late. But being able to do it virtually, we could set aside time when we can meet with everyone. And I think that has been a really positive thing from this experience.
How about you, Chrisia?
In terms of parent communication, we were virtual and now we're back in person. So when we were virtual, it was very much like Kathy said, parents were more involved. Of course, with first grade, they have to help their first grader and they were learning things alongside of them, which was really neat. Now that we're back in school, it's a little bit more hands off. So it has become a little bit more of a challenge because parents can't be on campus with all of the COVID regulations. We can't have parents there. So we've lost kind of that connection. We don't connect as much because they don't want to teach them anymore at home, which they don't have to now that the kids are coming to school. But then they're also more focused on other things. So I feel like there has kind of been a disconnect, when you don't have those parent volunteers or helpers in the classroom, they don't really see what's going on anymore.
Wendy's, I saw you nod at that, so I just want to go to you on this.
Yeah, I think with the parent relationship, which we know is extremely important as educators, that we need them. I try to communicate to the families, like, we need you. We cannot just do this job on our own. And the virtual learning has opened up our classrooms and allowed families to actually have access to what we're doing on a day-to-day. In some cases, that has been beneficial because some families were just clueless about what a teacher's experience is teaching 30, sometimes 40 kids on a Zoom, and hearing it is a whole nother thing than thinking about what somebody else does when you see it in real life. So I think there was a certain level of compassion and empathy that came from the parents from actually experiencing that. But on the flip side of that, having the access also opened teachers up to be critiqued in some cases in terms of what they're teaching, how they're teaching, the pace at which they're going. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about teaching and feel that they know what's best and how to do it. And so in that case, it has opened that up as well. But in terms of the parent relationships, I feel like I've had more communication with families than I would have normally, because usually when they drop them off to school, it's kind of like, okay, see you at 3. And now it's like you kind of have to step in the role as a parent to supervise where we would normally be in that space. So it definitely has opened it up. And I'm hoping that we will continue to build the partnership to see that even though when kids are at school, that doesn't mean that we don't need you guys at home as parents. We need you on deck all the time.
Yeah, very true. Dick, we have a question from, this is for you, Dick. It's from Joe Sands. He's a 5th grade teacher from Maple Shade, New Jersey. Joe, what's your question?
Hi, Dick. How can Scholastic engage more with parents to help educate them on the importance of reading and the impact it can have on them, especially when it comes to encouraging their children to read at home?
Great question. Thank you, Joe. We just had this wonderful conversation about parents and the difference that the pandemic has made. Probably Zoom is the best communication way with parents that we've ever had so far. And several of the teachers just gone through the saying that the communication was really better when you were on remote and had the opportunity to talk with families at home. I do think that parents have learned an awful lot about what the teachers do, and the ones I talk to are in significant admiration of how teachers organize learning and make it easy for kids to organize their own thoughts. And parents really are not able to do that, or they don't have the tricks, the knowledge of how to organize an inquiry that kids can follow through with. So I think they're very grateful. At the same time, they're more interested, I think, as Juan Diza said, that they want to know more about what's going on in the classroom. I think that's a great opportunity. In respect to what Scholastic can do to encourage parents to promote reading at home, I think parents all know that more reading is better for their child. They know that kids engaging in books is a wonderful thing. It's what the schools want to make happen. The question is, what can they do better? They can't, whatever we do to help parents has to be very short, clear, and precise. I think parents will devote themselves to engaging their child in reading if there's something they can do easily, readily, and simply. And so reading for a few minutes at home, starting a book, getting a child going is one way. We also provide, through our book clubs, short notes for parents that teachers can forward to them about what to look for in a specific title. Sometimes that kind of particular information going through email to the parent can be a help. But for the most part, they just have to have confidence that they can help, no matter whether they're great readers themselves or whether they love reading or whether they are even care that much or have that much knowledge about books, that the one thing they can do is just talk and read and show the child the importance of engaging with a book and make the child understand, or help the child understand, that it's important to the parent that they read. And that can be a very simple story. It can be encouragement. It can be saying, your teacher thinks you should read this. It could be, this is a wonderful story and it has a great ending. But any kind of encouragement that will let the child know that the parent wants them to read that book will be greatly helpful to that child at that moment, and presumably later in life if they develop the habit of reading.
Thanks, Dick. I want to move us into the realm of digital learning here for a while. I think most people agree that technology can't replicate those personal interactions many of you have already been talking about in the classroom, in the school hallways with the kids, or between students in the schoolyard. Nor can it actually replace the need for physical books altogether. But what I'm hearing is one of the silver linings of the past year has been the sort of revolution in how teachers have relied on and used technology. Kathy, you brought that up a little earlier. Leo, what do you think? I know you have a question for Dick on this.
I definitely see digital platforms becoming more prevalent in classroom instruction, especially this year, but I think there needs to be a balance. So Dick, my question is, how does Scholastic help maintain that balance between engaging students with literacy through technology and the need for books in the classrooms and homes?
Yeah, I think blended learning, digital and books together is the answer, Leo. I mean, I think we've learned a lot about the use of technology in the classroom this year. That Kathy made this point that she's much better able to do this. We've talked a little bit about helping the parents at home do it better. The kids have become better at managing learning on the computer. And as you opened your comment by saying that digital learning or computer-based learning is going to be more prevalent in the future, is absolutely correct. At the same time, the kids can move back and forth between the media. They're finding themselves engaged with computers. They could do foundational skill learning in a more organized way and do it more on their own if they're following a computer program. But at the same time, they're going to be engaged with books, and they have to have something to read. So they're not only getting the skills of reading, but the love of reading through the presence of books. And teachers have become much better at integrating and moving from the computer-based learning to going back to print in the classroom and putting the two things together. So I think the answer really is blended learning. We're getting better at doing that, and it's going to work better, and it's going to be easier for everybody. And kids will move from printed words to words on the screen and ideas that are being presented in both places. And there's a role for the teacher to make that happen, of course.
Dick, we have another question on this topic. It's from Katie Fadden. Katie is actually from Chicago, Illinois, and she's a pre-K teacher. Katie?
Hi. Dick, obviously we want an equitable digital learning experience for all students. And I know Scholastic can't do that alone, but how can schools, communities, tech companies, and publishers like Scholastic work together to continue to move the needle?
Well, this is a deep-rooted issue, right? Because of the inequitable distribution of computers in our society. Kids in some families have multiple computers, lots of connection to Wi-Fi, and the kids in other families have one computer or one phone for several different ages of kids. So we clearly have an imbalance of resources in our society. We have to fix that. It's a big problem. It's a social issue. People have to work together on this, and they are. And we see in the new federal funding that's coming into education a clear investment in leveling the playing field. But the place to level the playing field is in the classroom, because the schools can, invest in the equipment and have it there and have it in good condition and make it part of the curriculum, and the kids can, who may not have as much access at home, can get it in school. So the answer, I think, to this is At school, we can level the playing field by having the resources there in all schools, including extra resources for the schools that are in areas where there's not as much ability to fund the classroom. So that federal money can play a big role in this. But this has to be changed and improved. One of the real things our society has to accomplish, because we all know the jobs and the learning and the acquisition of information in the mid-21st century is going to heavily depend on digital access and digital skills and digital capability.
That was a huge issue going remote, and it was a struggle to try to find resources for our students so that they would be able to have access when we were shut down. It was a major concern. And the city and our schools were able to find a way to ensure that students could secure at least one device, not considering that most families have more than one child. And so trying to find time for each of them to log on with one device, it was a struggle. And then we also had the issue of connectivity. So some people had the device, but then they didn't have access because they couldn't connect and they had to find a hotspot. And so it was a lot of issues with the technology, and it just showed a glaring problem in our society in terms of inequity and not just having the proper resources needed to do the work.
I want to talk about something that's near and dear to our hearts. It's Scholastic Partnership. One of the great partnerships in our 100-year history has been with you, with educators. It's an honest and it's a very valuable collaboration. And I think conversations like today's are happening every day in book clubs and book fairs with our classroom magazine editors. Kathy and Chrissia, I know this is something we talked earlier that resonates with both of you. Chrissia, why don't you, I think you have a question for Dick.
First, I want to say again, thank you for this opportunity, Dick. These types of conversations are so valued by teachers. The fact that Scholastic takes the time to listen to what teachers have to say speaks volumes to the amazing things that you get from Scholastic. I mean, the surveys that come out with book clubs, I'm like, first one, like, oh, survey, fill it out. And I know that you guys are listening. So I think that matters a lot to teachers. It validates our voice. Even just you asking that question when we first started was validating. And then teachers also like community, right? That's why we teach. We love being a part of something. We love sharing with each other and learning from each other. Getting information from each other, solving problems together, and collaborating, which is really important. And I guess my question to you is, as pandemic has come and changed the way that we do things, and decision makers are making decisions up above the teacher level, what can Scholastic do to make sure that our teacher voice is still being heard?
Well, first, when I talk to people who are joining Scholastic, and I have an opportunity to sort of onboard them and give them some messages about the company. I start with saying, we're a service. We're there to help. We are nothing without the teacher. Teachers enable us to help them or allow us to help them, and our role is to do that. But the work starts with the teacher. We're nothing without the teacher and the teacher's support. We're there to help them do their job better, and they use our materials if they work well, they'll use them to carry out their jobs. But they're busy. They don't have time to read teaching guides and study up on this stuff. It has to work right then when they pass it out, and they have to, it has to be working for them. So we have to think and plan and make sure that our materials are going to work with the kids and then work for the teacher's purpose. So this partnership is more than just a slogan. It's a reality. It's a necessity for how we for our mission, our purpose, and why we're there, which is solely to help teachers do a better job. Now, you raise an interesting question as to, is there a way to get more teachers involved in listening to each other? I know when we have an advisory board meeting, or even a session like this wonderful one, which is so inspiring to all of us, teachers often say at the end of this, gee, we wish we could do this more often, because we're talking to each other we're in busy classrooms, we're in a school where we're all separated, we don't have that much planning time together, and we go home because we're exhausted and we have to, look at papers and then come back the next day, and we don't have time to exchange and think about what we do together. So I think what you raised is a really interesting question. Is there a way to use the technology that we're now using to have a broader conversation with teachers so they all can participate and put in their voice? Because just this session with four of us four of you talking with us, just shows how many great ideas can be generated by talking with each other. So I have in my mind a kind of a large national conversation that can be enabled by technology. We have to figure out how to moderate, such a thing. But I think it would be a very valuable thing to try. We'll see if it works. There are, Facebook groups and other groups of teachers that some of which are very, very popular. But the idea that we could all share in a conversation and problem solving and getting ideas on the table like the ones we're talking about now, I think could be incredibly empowering and supportive to teachers who are essentially in somewhat of a lonely job because they're there in the classroom with their kids and don't have an opportunity to reach out broadly to their colleagues.
Kathy, Dick just mentioned if the products work, you guys will use them. And I think that if it works is always an important piece of it. And you have a question sort of related to that.
I do. We really do rely on Scholastic for so much of what we use in the classrooms. But this year has shown us that we always need more. Dick, what are some of the ways you're continuing to help us meet the needs of students despite the many restrictions imposed on us?
Well, I think one thing that we've been talking about here, which I think is very exciting, is connecting more closely to the individual child. That would go to finding the books that connect to that individual child's interest, having her pick the title that she really wants to read. That's something that we do by providing, book clubs, book fairs, classroom libraries, a whole range of stuff that kids can find themselves in. Certainly more diverse books, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I think if we're trying to get away from sort of a solely whole class, everybody's learning the same thing at the same time, which is still necessary. It's still necessary to have that part of the school day and that focus on whole class instruction. But individualization is something that we can enable by having more resources in your classroom that will enable you to individualize to that, child's interest and capability and horizon.
I want to actually bring it back for a moment to you, Christia, because you've talked a lot about the individual child and your experience. And can you just hone back in on that for us for a minute?
I just have learned so much about what matters most. And it is that whole child. I valued the little celebrations where at one point, there's this expectation every first grader needs to be reading at blah, blah, blah level. And to experience this pandemic and to know, like, my kids finished school virtually, they started school virtually, and they're now back in person, but everyone is growing at a different rate. And so I have just created mini celebrations of their growth. And that is the most important thing. It's that look on their face of not knowing how to read to knowing how to read. It's having, these worksheets that we do in the mornings as the kids come in, because they all come in at different times. And it's just a read the word, and then you find a search and find is, I guess, what it's called. And, just recently I had one of my little girls who's just growing just at her own pace. And she was doing her search and find, and she's like, this is so much more fun now that I can read. And you're like, yes. So it's those moments of, you have been coming every day, trying your very best. And as we're Zooming, again, like I mentioned, not enough time in the day to sit with her, but for her to finally get it and like to finally enjoy that search and find, that is the small successes.
That's a huge success. That's not a small success. That's a huge success.
Good point.
Show of hands. How many of you guys have had that experience that Chrissy has just had with your? I mean, it's just, I can't even imagine. I mean, I'm jealous. I wish I was there for that.
It's kind of like the worth more than money moment, right? As a teacher, because you're like, and this is why I do this.
I want to move us into a topic that's been on, well, everybody's minds as of late. This is a time when conversations around representation and access unquestionably need to be happening, right? This pandemic, the social injustices we've all witnessed, they've underscored the inequities facing us as a society, but also much more in the classroom, that need for diverse books and resources in our schools. So I want to lead off this section. We have a question, Dick, for you from Helen Mui. She's a first grade teacher from Roland, California. Helen, hey, what's your question for Dick?
Hello, Dick. What is Scholastic doing to ensure that the books you publish help represent all students and help them reflect on their world and their culture?
Well, for many years, we've been aware that there are many different kinds of kids in classrooms. From the time I taught before most of you were born, to this day when half of the kids in this country, or slightly more, are kids of color or diverse backgrounds and languages. So that our classrooms are very different, but that drive has always been there to find the book that will relate to that child's life. And that has always meant finding diverse titles that reflect the experience of the child and the background of the child. And that's been something that we have specialized in for a very long time. Right now, we just have a plethora of wonderful things going on. We've got Rising Voices, which is a library of stories about boys that from African American Latino backgrounds, wonderful quality literature from all over different sources, but packaged as a special library called Rising Voices, which we make available to elementary schools. It's very popular right now for summer reading as the kids go home. We have just completed a sales conference where we had some wonderful diverse authors talking about their connection to kids and why they feel their stories will have an impact on the lives of children and how important that is to them to tell their stories in a way that will reach out to the children that are from that same background and experience. This is driven by our knowledge that there's so many kids out there who cannot find books that they relate to, that don't see themselves in the books that are handed out to them in schools, who, when they see a book that connects to them, changes their whole feeling about reading, and they become, thirsty to go forward and find other stories like the one that made them feel that they were represented in a book. It's not just a cliche. It's not just something we say, well, we've got more diverse titles. It's finding that book that has a quality of experience that reminds that child of who he or she is, and then propels them onto wanting to read more and find more about themselves.
Yes, Dick, there's no question that there is a demand now for diverse books, especially as our perspectives begin to broaden about what diversity actually means and what it includes. How do we get more direct access and exposure to diverse books for teachers and kids alike?
Well, obviously through our book clubs and book fairs, we make these, we search them out, we find them and we make them available. We bring them into the classroom and kids can find them and buy them if they have the money. If they don't have the money, the schools will acquire these books and put them in classroom libraries that are available to young people. I do think it's important to, one of the things that we do well is outreach into the classroom and be present in the lives of teachers and kids. So through our magazines, which are both print and digital, through our book clubs, which are in so many classrooms, and through our fairs, which bring books into the schools that kids may not have seen before, we have that outreach capability. But it's now extended by putting them on social media, by making them available through digital formats. We have videos of all these wonderful authors that are available free to teachers to just find them on looking on scholastic.com. So it's really about getting the word out, and that's something that that's who we are. That's what a publisher is supposed to make public, get it out there, and that's what we do. We reach everybody in the school through the schools, and that's where kids can be found. They all have to go every day where they used to until virtual came, but they all have to either go there either virtually or in person, and so through the classrooms, that's how the information can reach them.
Kathy and Leah, just on this topic, I just want to turn to you for a second and ask: in your classroom libraries, are you seeing that your students are getting access to the kinds of books that we're talking about, or books that they see themselves in? Kathy?
Yes, and I'm making a really big conscious effort, and I appreciate Scholastic really working in this area. That has been a big push for me recently in the last few years, actually. I know it's going to take time to develop it, but I know that every student being represented or seeing themselves in a book is the most powerful way, because what one child likes, what one book works with one child may not be the same for another. And so when you find what their interests are, you find what, when you know their background and you know their life story, you can really match a book with a child. And that can make all the difference in the world. I think back when I was a student, I don't ever really remember being represented in most books that I read, and I looked for it. I remember one time in a classroom when, my nationality was mentioned. Other than that, I was never represented. And so I think about that all the time when I'm working in my library, when I'm adding books. Now more than ever, that's what I'm looking for.
I agree 100%. I think that the idea of personalizing a child's learning experience through the selections that they have in a library is crucial to fostering a love of learning. Lifelong love of learning, I should say. Just as an example, I have a student who was brand new to the country, and she didn't speak any English coming into my classroom, was extremely shy about participating in class discussions. And I would like to say around November, we had picked up a text entitled Waiting for the Biblioburro, which includes some vocabulary in Spanish. And as soon as she heard those words, biblioteca, burro, she immediately identified with the character in the text, and her eyes lit up. And from that point forward, she wanted to participate in class discussions. She felt like she was a part of the classroom. And it was just an amazing thing to see, because prior to that, she felt like an outsider. And that's not something that you can really overcome as an educator in order to allow students to reach their full potential. So I completely agree that personalizing classroom libraries is extremely vital to student achievement.
That's a great story, Leo. And I think one of the things we talk about this a lot, is that providing great stories, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and information, has always been also how we help children contextualize their feelings, right? Especially around some of the most challenging issues. And gosh, there have been a lot of them this year. Janice Collins is an early childhood director in Brooklyn, New York. And I know, Janice, you have a question about this.
There's definitely a lot to process here. I personally have been using books like Junie B. Jones and Elephant and Piggy to read aloud to my kiddos. I'd love to hear from other teachers and from you, Dick, if you have any suggestions for other books or information that I could use in my classroom.
Thanks, Janice. That was a great question. I was just inspired by what our teachers have been saying about Leo's story about Burro and the connection, and suddenly the eyes light up. and it just as an illustration of how important this topic is. I mentioned our Rising Voices Library, which aimed at boys in elementary school, Latino and African American. I recommend that. Some of the books that we think of right away when asking for diverse books, The Word Collector, which is a favorite of mine and Kathy's, by Peter Reynolds, All Because You Matter by Tammy Charles and Brian Collier, I Am Enough by Grace Byers, my favorite book in the whole wide world by Malcolm Mitchell, and then of course our magazines at the elementary, the early childhood level, My Big World, Let's Find Out, Scholastic News, Storyworks. We were always finding diverse stories that come in a magazine format, both print and digital, but that's just the beginning of some ideas aimed at the younger reader.
I would love to hear from you guys just very briefly. Are there any that stand out for you in terms of recommendations? Chrisia?
The way that I find books for my classroom library is we go through the book orders for Scholastic book clubs, and the kids do what we call window shopping. And they circle 1,000 different things that they want. And in those mini conversations, Kathy's talking about, the more you get to know them, the more they want to learn, right? They want to please you because you have invested in them and they know that. So when they window shop, I always ask well, why did you pick this one? And they have a story to tell. Well, I really want this one. I really like comics, or I really like dragons, whatever it might be. And just recently, I've had a kiddo, another one that was just struggling with reading. It's so hard for him. And he circled Dave Pilkey. He wanted Cat Kid comic book. We got it for our classroom library. And I said, you get to read this book first. You're the first one. You circled it. He's reading. He is a reader. And it's amazing that it's comics. He loves comics. And Dave Pilkey is now his hero. But it's just little things like that. So when I'm looking for books, yes, I am looking for that child. I want them to see themselves, but I also want them to find the love and fun of it. And that was just one of my favorite stories.
That's a great story. It's a great story. All right, I have one last question. I know we've been talking a lot about the challenges of the year. And even throughout that, you guys have been so optimistic and so hopeful. So I know you're going to probably find your way through more challenges as we close the school year and head into the new one this fall. So what do you see, though, as your greatest opportunities? We started this we've been talking a lot about what you've learned in the year. What do you see as your great opportunities as you head into the fall? Wandisa, let's start with you.
I think some of the greatest opportunities is to rethink our curriculum and to really make it personal to our kids so that it represents what's happening in our world, what's happening in their lives. And that's the focal point of books, right? Is to provide those mirrors, windows, and sliding doors for our students. So definitely taking some thought around the curriculum and the resources and being more intentional and strategic about what I'm choosing to use to teach my students, as well as in terms of assessment, understanding that kids truly do learn at different paces and that it is okay and that everyone doesn't have to move exactly at the same time. This year has also taught us that kids can learn without the pressures of standardized testing. I mean, it seems like you only get it boiled down to like one test, and we see throughout this year so many transferable skills that the kids have learned this year that could never be measured on a test. So those are some of my takeaways for this year.
How about you, Leo?
I think based on our conversation today, one thing that I look forward to in the fall is allowing students to take ownership of their learning through selecting the texts that they love and identify with. It's extremely important. You have to consider the child's social emotional needs first and foremost before anything else. So I will strongly ensure that at the beginning of every single school day, I take into account each child's feelings and have that morning meeting and ask them how they're feeling to make sure that they are ready to learn and If not, as a class, come together as a community, as a family, to make sure that we build one another up and that we're ready to learn together.
My takeaway is that students need to have choice in the books that they read. And because this year we haven't had an opportunity to give them a classroom library to go in there and choose the books that they want to read. So I know now more than ever that choice is going to be really important. And I also think too, my takeaway will be to be able to keep those conversations going with parents and family members, and to really foster that community and work with parents and giving them support too, to make sure that they can help their students learn. And also, I think my big takeaway for the whole year will be in the summertime, when I have a time to relax and take it all in and get away from this from a little bit, to reflect on what was really positive, what was really good. I know I'll continue to work with other colleagues. I'll continue to go to webinars. I'll continue to learn and grow. And so that's probably going to be my big takeaway, is to be able to really reflect.
My biggest takeaway is asking why. And that goes for everything that we do as teachers, as educators, really. Well, why are we doing this? What is it for? With virtual learning, you had to really minimize the amount of time and instruction you had. So looking through what you're doing and asking, well, why are we doing this? What is it for? What is the purpose? Is this to put up on my wall? We don't have time for that. So thinking about what we're doing and doing it with purpose, right? So that whole child, again, the socio-emotional of each student, and why do they need to learn what they're learning? What's the most valuable thing? I think the personalizing of learning also means showing me what you're learning. What does that look like now compared to what it looked like before? I think that's shifted quite a bit. And really helping parents to understand that their kids are going to be okay, that even though they're not here, it's okay. You still love them, and they're going to grow. And when the time is right, they'll make that jump. And then lastly is just to continue finding value in my peers, all of my colleagues, being able to share and collaborate with other teachers on my campus and virtually has really helped me get through this year of teaching. And so I really want to continue with that, and loving the ones I'm with. And as I always tell my kids, to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud, like Maya Angelou says. So we're really just lifting each other up.
Well, our why for doing this was to listen to you, was to really listen to you guys. And boy, we love what you've had to say tonight. And I want to thank you all, not just for your thoughtful questions, but for your answers and for your honesty. And above all, wow, for your incredible commitment day in and day out, no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what obstacles you've had to overcome. You've been in there and you've taken care of and taught these children who so desperately need you. You guys are heroes. Every one of you, you're all heroes. Dick, I'm going to turn it over to you for one last time.
Well, I'm in a kind of heaven right now, because the four of you have just articulated my lifelong philosophy and mission. Choose books, get close to, get to the emotions. Why is it important? Why are we doing this? When I faced my first class of high school kids, my first day of teaching, and I had no student teaching, by the way. My first day of teaching, student teaching was my first day in a classroom. And I learned a lot in one day. And the first thing I learned was you have to get to the heart of the kid and find out what it is that makes that kid work. And what do they feel, and what do they believe, and how do you reach them, and how do you engage them? Otherwise, if you're trying to get them to learn and they're not connected and they're not inspired and they don't see themselves in it, they won't learn to the level that they need to. And so when I came to Scholastic, I used that same feeling in philosophy. Say, every day what we have to do is find out what's in the heart of that individual child. And we're serving millions of kids, so you have to have a very flexible mind to continue to think this one is like this and this one is like that, and you're going to find something different in every child. So you have to have a lot of different things that you try out. And so when I hear you all talking about how you're going to teach the individual child, you're going to bring out their confidence, you're going to reach their emotions, you're going to give them a feeling of comfort and safety by providing them with something that they can see the connection to themselves. That's my dream. That's what I think our company tries to do every day at scale all over the world. And to the extent that we can get into the heart and mind of that individual child millions of times over, but it's always it's always that individual child. It's not a million, you don't multiply it to get to the number. It's every one at a time. And that's what I'm hearing from these teachers today, that they've learned from the pandemic, that they're committed to carrying forward into a new year. We all believe that the new year will be somewhat more stable than the year we've been in, and schools will be functioning better, and kids will be back in in-person learning. And I think we look forward to a year that where there's going to be more structure in the kids' learning in their lives, and they're going to be safer feeling. But we've learned so much, but if it's brought us to a feeling of individualizing learning, and what Leo was saying, I think that's going to make a huge difference. We still have to measure, we still have to have tests, even though Wandiza, I think, is right that they learn so much more that are not on the test. But it's really having the kids walk away with self-confidence, self-esteem, a feeling of belonging, a feeling of wonder and joy and looking forward to life, and seeing themselves in what they're learning. All of the things that you talked about under the guidance of an amazing teacher who can make them feel all that stuff and organize that for them. And the parents too, who can have a window on this and understand, the value that you're bringing to their child and how they can help make that child feel even more excited about the journey they're on. So for me, this has been an amazing time to talk with you and hear all the things that you've learned, and it just reinforces our mission, and we will be back there to reach out to millions of kids one at a time next fall when the schools open their doors. We'll be with you. Then thank you so much.
Thank you, Dick. And to all of you guys, to everyone watching, all the educators watching, 1 week is not nearly enough time to show our appreciation. So I hope you have ours every single day of the year. Thanks again for joining. Be well. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.